everyone, I'm Jade le Roux and welcome back to WitnessTV. Today I'm joined by a truly inspirational guest. Help me welcome Nozipho Tshabalala.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And Nozipho is back in Pietermaritzburg, her hometown, to launch her memoir,
Yes.
After the Fires. And it's at the heart of it, Nozipho, your story, it's a journey of identity. As a little girl growing up in apartheid South Africa, she was passed off as colored for her own protection. And living between two worlds, she learned early what it means to adapt to survive. Years later, she goes on to break barriers in education, becoming the first girl in your family to graduate with a university degree. And from Pietermaritzburg Girls High, she launched a career that took her to global platforms where she now leads conversations with presidents, leaders, CEOs. But After the Fires reveals the woman behind the success, the one who has battled imposter syndrome, endured heartbreak and hope of IVF struggles, and faced the pressure of redefining herself as both a corporate leader and a mother in a world that so often demands women choose. Nozipho, thank you so much for joining me today to share your story. I've been so inspired by just the excerpts that I've read, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to feel the same way.
Thank you very much for having me. And you can call me Nosy. I only get called Nozipho when I'm in trouble, typically by my parents. But I'm so happy to be home. I was raised in Eastwood, and so I identify very much with being colored from a cultural perspective. Although I'm Black African, I was born Esbovini, which is actually near Sweetwaters. In Pietermaritzburg. I spent a few years in Maqongo, where the title of the book actually comes from, because that's where our family was actually caught in the midst of a petrol bomb during the ANC and IFP and UDM violence there, and that's why the book is called After the Fires. We survived those fires, and so it's so amazing to be able to come back home. I officially left Pietermaritzburg after I matriculated in 2002. So it's been 22 years.
Oh my word. Yeah, a
It's
lot
been
has
22
changed, I
years.
can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some good, some bad.
Absolutely. When you journey back to a place you call home, you always look for the things that are familiar, and you see some of those things. And what I found is the familiarity really lies in the people, the warmth, that
Well,
hasn't changed.
that's good. At least, yeah.
And some things are not so familiar. Sometimes you see the state of the city and places that used to be safe and beautiful that no longer look safe, that are no longer beautiful. Um, but it's a mixture of all of those things. It's a coming and a going. It's a gaining and a losing all at the same time.
Yeah, it's part of life. Things don't stay the same. Nothing's,
Yes.
yeah, static, yeah. Yeah, so let's start by congratulating you on your book.
Thank you.
And yeah, just from what I've read, yeah, it's really amazing. You had me in tears. So I'm excited to get into that part of
Sure.
it. But let's just fast forward a bit and pick off where you are now, and maybe just explain to our viewers who you are now. What are you doing? It's yeah, you're involved in some really exciting
Yeah.
projects, and yeah, just explain where you are now in your life, and what got you to this point where you were ready to share your life story.
Sure. So today I'm very proudly a mom. I have a
Congratulations.
son who's two and a half going on 18. I'm a wife to Rory Sang Shabalala, who is an amazing, amazing person. I'm a businesswoman, so I'm the CEO of a niche communications firm called the Conversation Strategist. And we are the go to firm when you want to moderate presidents, ministers, and CEOs around the world. Just as we came in, I was telling you I'm still pretty jet lagged. I've just landed from the US where I was moderating at the World Bank. So we work with large international organizations like the World Bank, the IMF, the United Nations. We work with governments and, of course, big corporates around the world like MasterCard and Coca Cola and Visa and so on. And that's what I do right now. I have obviously recently added the title author to all of that. And, people often ask me, so why did you decide to write a book and why now? And it's kind of a long winded story, but I always think it's worth telling that I didn't want to write a book. it actually was not on my vision board or my goals or any of that. I was quite content trying to figure out life as a mother, a wife, a businesswoman, and a leader in different spaces. And I got approached by the publisher and they said, "We think you've got a story to tell." And I remember thinking, "Oh my goodness, about what?" And the publisher said, "Well, we think you've moderated such important people in the world, from presidents to the likes of Bill Gates, Melinda Gates. You've moderated Michelle Obama. Surely you can write a book about all of the amazing lessons that you've learned from these people." And while I thought it was a fantastic idea, I knew that I didn't have the capacity to do it. I didn't have the bandwidth. I was still traveling a lot. My son was still very young, and I just didn't think the timing was good. So I kind of shelved it for a moment. And then the other thing that happened that triggered me towards a yes was a fight with my husband. Actually, we were hosting friends for dinner. And at some point in the conversation, my husband says, "No, babe, tell them your story." And I'm like, "What story?" He's like, "Your story." I said, "Excuse me? Like, what are you going on about?" And I really didn't know what this guy was going on about. And so once our guests had left that evening, I'm like, "Babe, what are you going on about asking me to tell people my story?" And I watched the shock horror on his face as he realized that I really didn't think I had a story to tell. And he literally had to sit me down and say to me, it's you actually haven't had a normal, I don't want to call it an upbringing, but you've survived so much in your life that it actually isn't normal. And because you've probably survived so much, you've probably normalized survival, and you haven't really paused to think about how much you've achieved in a short period of time, notwithstanding. And I think that's the essence of my story. It's notwithstanding. There were so many things stacked up against me, being born is Bovini, being caught in the violence, Emakongo, growing up in the violence of Eastwood. How does one come out of all of that and find themselves where I am? And I think it was a combination of all of these events. And then the last straw that broke the camel's back, I actually heard a song. And the song is actually by an artist called Once More Six. And the song is called, in English is translated as "I Have a Testimony," Ginobufagas. And I remember really listening to that song and realizing that I actually don't have the right to not tell my story, because as a believer in Christ, God has brought me through so much that I don't have the right to not share that with other people. I actually have a responsibility, not because a responsibility for your own praise and your own status and to be seen, but a responsibility to be a light and a pathway that shows others that there are ways out of Eastwood. There are ways out of Makongo. There's a life out of Isbovini, that people who are born into the conditions that I was born into can also have the life that I have now. So all of those things coming together eventually led me to calling the publisher and saying, "Okay, let's write a book."
You're right. I have something to say here. No, that's profound. And I mean, the journey that it took you to realize that, like you say, we normalize so much. And it's just, I mean, your resilience was birthed from just getting through everything. And then when you actually stop, and then you're telling everyone else's stories and helping shape theirs, and then you stop and you think, oh, wow. It's nice also that you have people who are close to you, who see you and see parts of you that you are maybe too close to actually see, and say, hey, but like, look at you and look at your story. And it's beautiful to, to just have that whole experience.
Yeah, and I want, Jade, it's such an important segue and contribution you make, because I eventually didn't write the story that the publisher had wanted, right? So they wanted me to write a story about other people and basically what I've learned from other people. And I signed the contract and committed to doing that. And then I went away and I tried to write that story. And you know what? I always say that I think God just said no. It would not come. I tried to write, it would not come. I tried to write, it would not come. I booked myself away for a week at an Airbnb to have quiet time. It would not come. So eventually I called the publisher and I said to the publisher, "I think you've got the wrong girl. I don't think I can do this. I thought I could write, but I obviously can't." And the publisher said, "You know what? well, we want to hear your story in any event, and then we build around your story the lessons from other people. So why don't you just start with your story, because that's going to be the easier thing to do. And that for me became the green light that I needed. And I just kind of like completely let go and started writing. And I knew that as I submitted my first contribution, I had to submit my first 3 chapters. I knew, one, that I was in trouble, that I was in breach of contract, and that I was not writing the book they had asked me to write, because what had come out was things I didn't know that I needed to get out for me, not for with a particular audience in mind and what will people think and how will people consume this, but for me, like, I need to get this out of myself. And the story that came out firstly was centered on this wrestling with wanting to be in control. So the book is called After the Fires, Unlocking the Power of Letting Go. And it is about my private and public struggle with always needing to be in control, and coming to a place in my life where I've realized that control is not good and it's not bad. It is both light and it is both shadow. That there are moments in my life where I have to be in control, where I had to be in control to survive, to make it out of the places I was born into, out of the conditions I was born into. But there also comes a time when the thing that has served you all your life starts becoming the thing that's standing in your way. And so as I've gone through life, I've come up against these walls where the moment demanded that I let go of control and I release myself and go, maybe uncertainty is the answer. And that's been incredibly difficult. So that's what I started writing about. I use my life story to bring to the surface this very real struggle that I think a lot of us have. And the publisher said to me, look, you know what? We think that it's okay. We're going to amend the contract so that you get to write and produce the book that is a reflection of the story that is in you rather than the story that's expected of you. And that's how the book actually came about. And this is what I talk about. And it was the first time actually coming out of the shadows as just being a person who is in the business of being in conversation with other people and being a platform for other people to be in conversation, and just being a person rather who for the first time is having her own conversation with the world.
And also, it's a conversation with yourself, because you're reflecting on aspects of your life that you've, probably never thought to share. And I think what you said is so true, because, when it comes to, as a writer, I also have experienced that you have to write what's true. You have to write. Ernest Hemingway, there's a quote. He says, "Write one true sentence." And it's like when you're battling, you see, I need to start writing, and you can't. Sometimes you just have to be honest with yourself and say, what is the truth for me? What is it that's inside me that I have to get out?
Yeah.
So that's it's, and I can see from your writing, it is so honest and it is so raw and personal and intimate, and I think that's what makes the story. It's
I love the fact that you've honed in on the honesty of the story and the integrity of the story, because I didn't want to write a book. When I finally wrote those 3 chapters, I was just said to myself, you know what? If I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it properly, because I don't want to have to do it again. I don't want to do over. I don't want to have regrets about how I wrote this and what I omitted and what I held back and what I could have said and should have said. And I had to have a very honest conversation with myself to say that, am I actually going to write and write properly? Or am I going to withhold and manage and stage manage the story that I was going to be writing? And I realized that was actually part of the journey of letting go of control, because my professional life is a lot about stage managing. It is about controlling the narrative. It is about holding people's images and statuses and presenting them to the world in a particular way. And so I felt like the final rebellion of honesty that I could have for myself was to, and I use this language lightly, was to go balls to the wall and just go, I'm going to write and just write and just write it as is. I did have to have some very tough conversations with myself about whether I was ready for the world to know certain parts of me that, one, the world didn't need to know, that I didn't owe anyone, and that the world wasn't entitled to know, but that I knew that if I shared, would bear a nakedness, but that would be a gift and a shared intimacy with the person who's reading the book. One of the things I often get asked is, what are the things that you left out? And the answer is yes. And those are not aspects of my story, but sometimes we become collateral in other people's stories. People have experiences, and you get splattered with the blood that comes from that bleed or that wound. And in moments where I'm not the central character and something has happened, but it's not my story to tell, I have not gone there out of respect for those people to carry their own stories.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Definitely. Let's get into actually the story and
Yeah.
part. Talking about. Let's start at the beginning with your childhood. There's the chapter passing for colored,
Yes.
and you write about hiding in plain sight. As a child who could pass for colored during a very political, violent time. Can you walk us through that time and the genesis of how you became Bridget Anderson and,
Yes.
that origin story
Yeah.
and how that shaped, this identity?
I love the fact that we're having this conversation right now. I just actually came from Eastwood. So my dad and I we went back. We journeyed back together. We went back to Makongo. We went to Eastwood. We went
That must
to
have
all
been...
very emotional. And I was saying to the team that I was with that I actually don't think I have the words to articulate what I was feeling. I was feeling like a vibration, not like a full on shake, but like an inner vibration, like there was an aliveness in me that was activated that I can't quite put my finger on. And I think going back to the places that have shaped who you are is, I must do that for you. And I've discovered and had that experience for myself today. But when I go back to the identity transitions I've had to have as a child, a lot of it was not in my control. I didn't choose to be born in '84. I didn't choose to be born into a family that was then caught in that political violence of the time. And so what then happens is my parents exercising the little control that they had of the situation, and what they prioritized was to save my life. And so, in order to save my life, they fled the petrol bombs and the violence in Makongo, and they gave me away temporarily with only faith that they would one day get me back. And remember that I'm their firstborn daughter together. So, they give me away temporarily to the Anderson family, and that is because the Andersons are colored, and it turns out they are actually harboring black kids whose parents are on the run and protecting them. And colorism then works in my favor at that moment, in the sense that I'm light enough to pass off as colored, and with braids in my hair can be disguised so that it doesn't reveal the true blackness of who I am. And I don't know how they got this right, because I don't know how you get a 4/5-year-old to remember not to answer to the name that they've known all their lives. And so instead of answering to Nozipho, to actually only answer to Bridget, which was my second name. And I'd never been called Bridget before that. And to not identify with my surname, which was Mbanjwa at the time, only identify with being an Anderson. I don't know how they got that right, but I thank God that they did. I thank God that they had the courage to do that. I thank God for the Andersons for having the heart, not only to take me in, but to take the risk of taking me in. I talk about in the book that, honestly, it could have come down to a life for a life. And they were willing to put their lives on the line so they could save the lives of the children that were under their care. And I go through that identity transition not willingly, but because those are the cards that I've been dealt. And as a child, honestly, I had no consciousness about this being a thing that I was going through. It's only much later. And I think the first moment, actually, I realized that, hang on a minute. I've actually gone through something that's quite distinct. I was in grade 11. I was 16 going on 17 years old, and I'm sitting with my university forms, and I'm having to fill in my name. And I remember because what happened is that because the school system in South Africa still wanted you to have an English name, I kept the name Bridget, despite the fact that when my parents came to get me back, I became Nozipho again at home. So I was Nozipho Mbanjwa at school, Nozipho Mbanjwa at home, and then Bridget Mbanjwa at school. And so throughout primary school and throughout high school, everybody knew me as Bridget Mbanjwa. I get to grade 11, I now have to fill in my university forms. And I pause and I go, but what's the name that my parents gave me when I was born? Sure. What did they want the world to call me? And it wasn't Bridget Mbanjwa. The name I've been called Bridget as a response to a crisis that we found ourselves in, and we never broke out of that crisis. And so I do the first act of activism for myself, I think, and I fill in Nozipho Mbanjwa for the first time at the age of 17.
You're able to make that conscious decision.
It's like a conscious decision to reclaim your name. And so I know this is going to just sound so theatrical and, fluffy, but I don't think I would be as good at my job as I am had I not gone through the experience of having to be forced to build a fluidity in my identity. I know what it's like to be Black, but go to a white school. I know what it's like to be Black, but play in the streets with colored children. I know what it's like to be Black and have to be authentically Black in your family because that's the way you show respect. And how to move within those three identities all in one day. If I just take you to last week, on one of my panels, one of the ladies was from Peru. The lady next to her that was moderating was from the United Kingdom. The gentleman next to me was from the State Bank of Pakistan. And then there was myself. And I am expected in a space of an hour to speak to these three people who not only come from very different geographies in the world, but see the world in very different ways and engage the world in very different ways. I would not be able to do that with the confidence and the capability that I can had I not gone through what I'd gone through. When I do my job, it's almost like there's like a hidden muscle that comes alive because my body just knows how to meet people where they are at, who my body and my posture knows how I need to be for people to connect with me, to trust me, to want to listen to me and want to engage with me in ways that I think if I was just a singular identity would be a lot more flat and not as multidimensional. I know that sounds very woo-woo, but I hope it's landing.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And something that looks like an injustice, to be robbed of your identity. Yeah. But and maybe it's to the justice of your age, maybe being so young and being able to, obviously, children can adapt way easier.
Yeah.
That, everything that was bad and, that would have been a weakness, you've actually managed to just nurture it and just garner it and make it into one of your greatest strengths.
Yeah.
That's profound.
So there's a line I keep using in the book. I use the analogy of a river throughout the book, and I talk about how we are the sum total of all the places that we've been, and we are the sum total of all the people we've needed to be. And one of the things that I argue for strongly in the book is that we need to embrace our full stories, even the parts of us where we feel we might have been standing still, or there might have been pain, or there might have been trauma, because it is the combination of those things that actually makes us who we are. Imagine if I didn't have the traumas that I had, I don't think I would be doing this job that I'm doing today. And I'm not saying that I'm grateful for trauma and I'm celebrating pain. I'm saying that I acknowledge that I went through something deeply traumatic, but I'm choosing how I use that in my today and in my tomorrow.
Because that's all we have. We can't, like you say, we have no control over what happens to us, but we can choose how we're going to respond and how we're going to use that experience.
Exactly.
And you've used it to build your life and to help others as well, also through sharing your story. You're also talking about, control and what we can't control. You describe control in your book as something that you held onto, your family held onto for survival, and that you only gave up under the threat of death.
Yes.
And so you've touched on it, that need for control throughout your adult life. How have you learned to, I think your book speaks, learning to let go. How have you learned to balance it with being vulnerable?
So I don't have the answer. I wish I had like this secret code or password that I go, okay, time to not be in control. It is a daily struggle. And the thing about life is that life will keep giving you invitations to struggle through. And you only get better at struggling through. One of the lighter-hearted stories I like to share is, the frustration of my now husband, then boyfriend, not proposing. Because, of course, I had a plan, right? I had a plan, and that plan was in my control. Or so I thought. I had a plan. I was like, okay, my 20s are going to be about studying and getting all the degrees that are going to allow me to make progress in life and get ahead. Then when I turn 30, I'm going to meet the right guy. And then by 32, we're going to be married. And then 34, we're going to have the first baby. 36, we're going to... In fact, I wanted 4 kids. So there must have been twins in the mix somewhere and so on. And it's in little moments like this that life comes and says to you, you're not in control. You're not always going to be in control. You're not always going to be the one who's calling the shots. The plan is not always going to go according to what you believe. And just my husband's stubbornness of not proposing when I wanted it was just a little reminder that, Nozi, sometimes in life, when you let go and invite surrender, it becomes a strength and it creates space for people to just be more themselves around you. And I eventually got to a point where I was like, I'm dumping this guy. Like, I'm done. I don't want anything to do with him. Like, I am absolutely done. And that, I think I made the decision to dump him in November, and he proposed in December.
So you woke him up a bit.
Well, he didn't know that I was planning to dump him. Like, I was just like, literally, like, I think my thing was like New Year's Eve. I'm giving him to the last day of the year. And then he proposed on the 10th of December or the 9th of December.
He just made it.
So he just made it. But I had to arrive at a place of surrender and just realize that I can't bend somebody else's life to fit my plan. Life doesn't work like that. He's got his own life. He's got his own ambitions, his own dreams. And his purpose in life is not to fulfill my purpose. It's to be himself.
And you want him to arrive at that decision that he wants to spend his life with you by him.
By himself.
Not under pressure.
And not because I have now bent him to like fit into my plan. So it's little things like that. Short, second but very short story. My son is just going through potty training. It's a classic example. When I thought he was ready for potty training, he was not ready. And he made a point of showing me that, when I am ready, I will get it right. And the minute I just backed off and just waited and said, I will allow you to lead me, we did it. We got right through it. But it was a conscious, realization, oh crap, I'm doing it again. I'm doing the control thing again. I'm watching other moms whose kids are getting potty trained, and I'm allowing my competitive spirit to go, oh no, my child needs to be potty. And then I just had to go, no, this is another opportunity to choose differently, because old Nozipho would have just pushed through and just stubbornly, we're going to get it right. And sometimes the answer is to stop, and just to take a step away and to let go and allow yourself to be led. And the way is a lot easier. I wish I got it right a lot more often than I do. I don't always get it right, but I can say that my consciousness has been elevated, and my awareness about how I show up in spaces, how I behave in spaces, the things that I'm stubborn about and the things I'm not stubborn about. My willingness just to be open to being wrong is another indicator that it's okay to not actually have it and not to be right about it, because I don't have to be in control of it right now. In fact, part of struggling is part of the gift of that moment.
That must be very liberating when you finally allow yourself to just say, okay, it's okay if I don't have it all, and just trust the process to unfold when it's supposed to. And like you say, it's not something you arrive at. I think we all have to. We get it right one day, and you know, it's a constant learning process.
Yeah.
And then leading from that, you know, talking about vulnerability and things that are outside of your control. Let's talk about your IVF struggles that you really do take readers inside that journey so honestly and so intimately. And I think, you know, talking about that earlier, you were saying choosing what you're going to share and how deeply you're going to share. Was this one of the parts where, you know, you had to, like, you know, be really introspective of, do I want to share this with the world, and why, and what made you decide to open up so, and how hard was it to actually do that, and what really made you decide that this is why I want to do it? And
I think my initial posture was, I was hesitant because I knew that it wasn't just my story. Fertility or infertility, whichever way you want to frame it, is a couple's journey. It's not just your own journey. And it was very liberating to have my husband say to me, I trust that whichever way you choose to write about it, you'll carry it with love and care. So that was liberating. But the thing that really actually got me to dig my heels in, that I'm definitely going to write about this, is when I wrote that last chapter, I was actually in the midst of losing the children that I speak about, that we lost along the way. But in one of the visits, my husband and I walked in to the fertility clinic, and in the lift, we bumped into a very, very, very close family member. And we had no idea that this person was struggling with infertility, and she had no idea that I was here as well. And I just thought of that moment, and I thought, firstly, I think this just stops with me. Generationally, this is going to stop with me. The secrecy, the shadowiness, the silence around it, in this family, it's going to stop with me, because the silence then breeds the inability to support each other. She had no idea that I was going through this. I had no idea she was going through this. We are close enough to have been pillars of strength for each other. And I took that decision, and I said, I will talk about it, because I think the first thing we need to do is to take away the veil so that people can get help. People can seek out help, and that then people can show up for people, because you are being open about the struggle that you are working through. People can pray with you. People can't pray with you and for you when you're not even telling them what it is that you are struggling with. And so for me, it was a very conscious decision. And I also, I didn't want to sugarcoat it. And, I didn't want to lecture people about it, like, oh, in fact, when I wrote that chapter, I wrote it like a journal, because it was so hard to write. I was like, okay, the only way I'm going to get through this is almost journaling it as it happens on a daily basis, and then trying my best to then just put it together. I'm very proud of that chapter. I'm proud of the fact also that it doesn't end perfectly. Everybody expected that in the last few pages I'm going to talk about, oh no, miraculously now we have a second child. We don't. And we continue to pray for a child. We continue to hope for a child. And I think it was important to not to end it on a perfect full stop with the bow tie, because that's exactly what the book is about. I don't have control over that. And I don't have control over where the story ends and how it ends. And I didn't want to create a false perfection by now trying to round it off and, put sprinkles and so on. That the abruptness of how the book ends is life itself.
And like you say, it's about normalizing the struggle. So often as women, there's this prescribed, okay, you know what, get married, have children, and there's this pressure. And yet that's not the reality. It's not just as easy for so many women. And yet, like you say, it's the silent struggle that women just don't talk about, because they're not empowered to actually say, this is the reality. The reality is this, not the converse. That's what it's expected. It's not just the magical, miraculous, smooth sailing road that some have, but not everyone, and many don't. And the fact that, your experience was saying that people so close to you can, you can be going through this battle and so silently, that definitely, those kind of taboos need to be exposed.
100%. I just think that silent struggles are the worst, because I think they feed norms, they feed misconceptions. We seem to think that when we talk about infertility, we talk about it in the frame of a woman's experience, and we forget that it's a shared journey. There's most often than not a man that's involved in that journey as well, who also needs support, who also needs to be understood, who also needs an outlet. But if we're not saying anything, and we're not creating the space for people to say things safely, then we're not going to be able to extend that support. And so I'll say this again, I'm very proud of that chapter.
No, it's like you said, it's written like a journal, and I think that is why it's so powerful, because you really just connect and bring people into that journey so powerfully.
Thank you.
So and then also, speaking about roles and the kind of things that we don't, often we kind of just assume and just take on. There's this powerful moment in that chapter where you're talking about choosing, you have to make a decision on whether you're going to transfer the first embryo, whether it's going to be a female or a male.
Yes.
And you say you didn't want a daughter first.
Yeah.
Specifically because you don't want her to carry the burden of being a first girl.
Yeah.
And you were an eldest daughter yourself. How was that experience? And obviously you've carried that emotional burden strongly enough to make that very distinct decision.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell us about that?
People who were close to me were surprised by that decision, because I think they know me for being a feminist, and it is about empowering women and equality and all of those things. And I think those things are all true. But I also know the weight of having to be the girl who does more housework, who does more care work, who takes on the responsibility for parents. And there's culturally, I think, we often talk about the invisible labor that women do, but we often forget that, plus culture, when you add culture to that, girl children are just burdened with so much. If a parent falls sick, there's an automatic expectation that it's the girl child will do the caring. In other societies, when parents don't have enough money to send their children to school and they have to make a choice, it's the girl that stays home, because her value is seen in her ability to care and not so much in her ability to be an economic provider. And so the boy will go to school so that he can maybe one day get a job and provide, and the girl becomes the nurturer. Even as girls growing up at home, we just carried so much of a weight of maintaining the household, being taught how to be good wives to someone one day. And I just thought of all of that, and I thought, not my daughter. If I have a say in it, not my daughter. Because I also realized that it's the same society that puts only the burden of procreation on boys. All you need to do as a boy child is to have sex and have another child, and preferably another boy child, so that he can carry on the family surname. That is how our culture is wired. And the girl child carries all of these other invisible weights. And I just thought, small activism. My husband was even surprised, because he was like, oh, I was expecting you to put up a fight. And I said, no. If I can spare my daughter the weight of having to do all of those things, then she doesn't have to go through that.
I think that's such a profound um, moment and decision, and it really struck me, and I connected with that too. It comes because we don't speak about the
No.
role that daughters, that children, just because you're a woman, you go through, and the burdens. It's kind of like this unconscious thing, that we just assume,
Yeah.
and to actually just in that one sentence just highlight and expose that, I think, yeah, that was very powerful.
No, thank you.
It is
Actually,
a
you're the
form of
only person who's
activism.
picked that up in anybody who's interviewed me. So I thank you. I mean, I thought, like, I knew that I had doubts sometime as I was writing whether people would hear what I'm actually trying to say, because I didn't also have like time to sort of like explain it at length. And in that simple sentence, I wanted to expose
Yes.
that invisible labor that we carry as girl children, and that actually as mothers, if we are given the choice, we would spare our girl children that weight. But it's just a conversation that we're just not
Yeah.
having.
And that's what was so powerful. Like you said, in that simple sentence, it just, well, for me
Thank
at
you.
least, it said so much. Yeah, and then let's talking about motherhood and identity. How becoming a mother, how has that transformed your identity and how you see womanhood, and especially the journey that you took to get to this place and to
Yeah.
become a mother.
I used to roll my eyes, to be quite honest, at especially first time moms before I became a mom. This whole thing about, oh, your heart is just going to get bigger and you're just going to be so much love and you won't believe you can love this. And I was like, oh, guys, please, I get it, but it is absolutely true. I have never known a purer love. Motherhood, it's an invitation to rediscover love for yourself, how you want love to be, how you want to experience love, how you want to give love, how you want to share love. It's been an absolutely magical experience. I now understand why people have so many kids, because imagine being able to have that abundance of love over and over again in so many people. I think it's helped me think differently as a professional woman. I'm a lot more focused on legacy and what am I building? What am I leaving behind? Um, what is my child going to point to once I'm gone? Institutionally, what is it they're going to say? This is the institution my mother built. Um, and it doesn't take away that I still am very ambitious for myself, but there's another layer, there's another striving. Um, it's challenged me physically a lot because, as I said, I travel a lot. My son is still relatively young. It's challenged me emotionally because I can't duplicate myself. And so when I travel and my son doesn't have his mother at home, how do I carry that emotional weight? How do I carry that trade off? How do I make peace with that trade off that I've taken the decision to fly 20 hours to Washington, spend 48 hours on the ground and another 20 hours at home, instead of being home with my son, taking him to school, picking him up from school and so on. I have to make those conscious decisions. And that takes an emotional toll that I don't think, sometimes we talk about mom guilt, right? I don't think we've spoken enough about mom guilt, but also I don't think we've gone beyond mom guilt to really engage with, so how do we work it out? How do we work it out? How do we make it work? How do we stop shaming women for absence? How do we stop shaming women for striving to be like the men and more that they're married to? How do we support women so that they can be confident and go out in the world and do amazing things and not feel ashamed about the kind of mother that they're being? I don't think we've cracked the code on that. It's motherhood has raised alarm bells in my body and in my mind about the gaps in the lived experience of a professional traveling mother. I don't think we've really figured out what that means for women. I don't believe in balance and that there's a way of like doing it all at the same time. I believe in grace, that you firstly have to extend grace to yourself,
Yeah.
that you're not going to be everything to everyone all the time, but also that what makes it possible for me to do the things that I do is the grace that I receive from the people who love me. The grace I receive from my husband, who will then step in and be the parent for the both of us. The grace I experience from my friends, who instead of shaming me for absence, will cover for me. Who will pick up my son because they notice that I'm away for 2 weekends in a row and say, "Oh, we'll pick him up so that he can have an outing," and not make me feel like I'm a bad mom for not being there. The grace that I'm extended to by my family, who would say, "We know you can't make this, so we'll show up doubly so that we can make up for your absence." I want to figure out what is the architecture of grace so that we can replicate it, right? And a lot more people can extend grace and receive grace.
I love that, focusing on the grace, because like you say, women are always expected to be everything to everyone all at once, and to kind of like just it's not about balance.
No.
It's about grace and everyone having that grace. And it starts with saying, you know what, we can't be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
We have to allow ourselves to feel that way and to forgive ourselves for that, so it's just throwing those pressures and expectations out, and then just recreating the narrative to say we're all here to help each other, to extend that grace to everyone. That's really powerful way of looking at it.
Yeah, I'm a big believer right now that the biggest gift that I receive professionally from my husband is his grace that allows me to be everything that I want to be in the world and more.
And then talking about motherhood and identities and, juggling the two, there's also a chapter where you focus on your mother's decision to go back to school at the age of 48 and become a teacher. And you say that was also that had a profound impact on your life.
Yeah. So my mom had a grade 10. So it used to be called a standard 8 at the time. So she didn't go back from grade 1. She went back from standard 8. They used to call it a junior certificate. So it was a JC for short. And basically what a JC was a certificate that Black people used to get during the apartheid years that would allow them to finish high school at standard 8, because the prevailing view was you've learned everything that you need to learn as a Black person. There's nothing else that you need to know as a Black person. And in fact, you are trained enough now to go work in the kitchens, to go do the kind of labor that was reserved for Black people only. And it was only white people who would be allowed to progress past standard 8, past the JC, and sort of go into standard 9 and standard 10. So my mother had a JC. So at 48, she then decides that she's going back to school, and she's actually going to grade a standard 9 and a standard 10, so grade 11 and matric, which she did through Abbott. So she went to night school. At 48, at 50, she matriculated and had registered for a degree at UNISA, and at 53, she had a Bachelor of Education.
Amazing.
And one of the things that my mom said was that she did not want to die not being the person that she feels that God had destined for her to be. And I remember saying to her, yeah, but what's that person? And it was the clarity that she answered me with still baffles me to this day. She said, I'm a professional. God wants me to be a professional. And in my mother's eyes, a professional was a teacher. It was a nurse. It was those things that we understood to be professions in those days and age, that day and age. But I think the bigger lesson for me was there's no such thing as too late. There's no such thing as being. I could never be embarrassed about doing something because I've outgrown it or it's too late. If that's the lived experience that I had, the privilege of being a part of, watching my mother make that decision and follow through on her decision, I honestly think that was probably the greatest gift. I can't think of a single thing that I wouldn't do because I should have done it earlier. It doesn't matter. I'll do it when I want to do it. And I'll do it when I get the opportunity to do it. I always talk about how I don't want to say my mother wasn't educated. My mother wasn't not educated. My mother didn't have access to education. And when given half the chance, she was then able to get that access. And so my mom was a bigger than life character in my life, but if there's one of the most profound lessons that she left for me, it was exactly that. This idea that it is never too late to go back and pick up from where you left off and be the person that you believe God has designed and destined for you to be.
You also write about how Black women often lose their individual identities once they take on the title of wife and mother, through names like Makoti.
Yes.
And how do you see that pattern evolving in today's generation of women?
You know, it's quite interesting. I wasn't conscious of it growing up, but now that I reflect on it, I realize that a lot of the mothers around me actually didn't, I had no idea what their names were. All I knew that they were the mother of. In the same way that my mother was called Maga Nozi, which is Nozi's mother. And there were swathes of women who I can't tell you what their names were because we just never knew their names. I think there's been a modernization of our society that's lost that a little bit. I've heard kids call their mothers by their first names. I mean, my son does that to me and my husband from time to time. And I know it's part of like learning names and identities and they outgrow it over time. But I think we've lost some of that to whom I belong. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think there are moments where it's okay to actually be in the world on the basis of your own name and who you are versus just whose you are and who you belong to and whose wife you are or whose mother you are. But these things are not black and white. There are contexts where whose you are is actually more important than who you are. I think it's up to us as women to have clarity about those contexts and when it's important for us to be referred to as Dilo's mom versus where it's important for me to be known as Nozipho Tshabalala. And there's a quick example. My husband and I don't always get to work together, but we got to do some interesting work this year, around one of the G20 projects. And my husband works with the Auditor General of South Africa and does some advisory work. And they were looking for somebody to hold a global conversation with all Auditor Generals from around the world. And it just so happened that I was the person who was on the list, not because I'm married to him, but because I'm bloody good at my job. And so when the connection or the realization was made that we're actually married, somebody said, "Oh no, we're using Nozi." And somebody said, "Oh, which Nozi?" They said, "Rory's wife." And he was in the room. And he said, before he could even answer, the Auditor General herself stood up, and she's a woman. And she said, "You will not reduce Nozi to just Rory's wife. She is a conversation strategist. She's the best that there is in the world. And in this context, the fact that she's Rory's wife means absolutely nothing." And that's the point I'm trying to make. There are moments where you can't reduce me to the people whose I am. But there are moments when the most important thing is whose I am. When I go to Limpopo with him, to his family and so on, the most respectful, kind, and loving thing that people can say to me is just to call me Rory's wife. So context matters. But you have to have clarity about when you need to correct people so that they are operating with the right identity in the right context.
And that's such a central theme to your book, the multiplicity of identity.
Yes.
You've been Bridget, you're Nozipho, your mother, your wife, you're, a corporate leader within your own right. And it's kind of saying, I can be all these things.
Yes.
And they are who I am, but you deserve respect in all those titles, but it's, it's together. It's that, it's not being reduced to one. And that's how we navigate all those titles and not just, cast them aside and say, not now, not now. But we can be a whole full person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
100%. I think we often miss the multiplicity of identity, and I'm hoping that the book is a reminder to women as well, to the point you've just made, that we do have to be a lot of people in a lot of contexts, but on your terms.
yeah,
Let it be on your terms.
on your terms. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then, you're a global moderator. You're a strategist. You work. You're on the stage with presidents, with important people. And yet, in your book, you still say you still battle imposter syndrome. How have you navigated, maintaining that confidence, even within yourself, and what tools have you found that help?
I love that you've asked that question because my thinking around imposter syndrome has evolved a lot. I watched a video by Reshma Sojourn. She is an indigenous American woman who, and in this instance, she was giving a talk at Smith College in the US, and Smith College is an all women's college. And she was talking about imposter syndrome, and she was saying this is the last time that she's talking about it because, and I agree with her, that imposter syndrome is a man made phenomena, just like racism, just like all the isms that we suffer from. I take a lot of exception to the fact that there's a disease out there that only women can catch. I take exception to the fact that that disease somehow miraculously became a thing when women started breaking into the corporate world and started breaking through glass ceilings and started being more than just the typist and the secretary. I take exception to the fact that in every conference and conversation, a woman will be asked about how she copes with imposter syndrome, and a man will never be asked. I think I take exception to the fact that um, imposter syndrome actually becomes a distraction. Because when you're so concerned about whether you're good enough, whether you're worthy, whether you deserve what you've just achieved, you lose sight of what you're supposed to be doing. And that's getting the job done. Um, and so I have subscribed to the Reshma Sojourn School. And I'm like, I don't have imposter syndrome. I don't suffer from imposter syndrome. I don't have tips for nobody on imposter syndrome. And in fact, I think having shakes in your confidence, feeling a little bit doubtful, feeling a little lack of self-belief is normal. It's normal when you're doing something new. It's normal when you're doing something bigger than you've done before because that is a human reaction. And I think we need to stop making this about a deficit in women because it's not. We're not
And
sick. We're great, actually.
no, I really like that it's such a revolutionary way of thinking about it. And it's like if you give this label, give it a name, how much power by giving it this name, how much power does it actually hold over us? And now it becomes an excuse and something that we have to, another thing that we have to overcome. And like you say, men also have confidence knocks, and yet because they don't ever get told, oh, this is that, then
Yeah,
they deal with it because there's no name.
Space. Give them space to be honest about how they're struggling, and maybe they're feeling a little shaky and not as confident, and they also have questions because we make imposter syndrome only a thing that women get to struggle with. I just think no, I'm not going to struggle with it. I refuse. I have to carry so much as a woman. I'm not going to carry that one too.
No, I love that. Yeah, I think let's start a new movement and ban imposter syndrome from the dictionary.
There we go.
Let's talk about the title, After the Fires. It's so symbolic, for your memoir. Like you've explained, what it speaks to, but in terms of the theme, survival, rebirth, renewal, going forward, reflecting on your whole journey and where you're headed, how would you say, what does after, what does after mean for you? How does after look?
I love that. I think after is not completion. I think after is consciousness. Because you don't get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm cured of control, I'm all good. But I think you just develop a deeper consciousness about how you react in certain situations, how you show up, how you bleed on other people, or how you become a light in the presence of other people because of who you are around them. And so coming through the fire for me is achieving a deeper consciousness about yourself and your awareness. It's not completion. There's because even after the fires, if you go back to biology, there's a rebirth. That's when new life comes. That's when new growth comes. And I think those are things that are all symbolic, with a deeper consciousness and a deeper awareness that comes only from having gone through something really difficult that you've struggled through. And on the other side of that, you have a deeper awareness of who you really are.
And I think it speaks to the fact that, I'm thinking of, rediscovering, your book talks about, rediscovering who you are, identities, and we all have multiple identities. And it's not a case where we arrive at this destination that this is who I am. We can constantly change. We can rediscover. It's that process. It's not this arrival of, okay, this is it. This is who you are now. This is who you are now, but you can change because life is constantly happening and we're not in control. So we can constantly be rediscovering ourselves as well.
And meeting ourselves anew. I think that's the ultimate invitation. And I maybe want to share this quick snippet of a poem. My favorite poet is David White, and there's a poem called Sometimes, and he talks about how sometimes you come to a place whose only task is to trouble you. So sometimes we come against things that just, they are struggles, they're troubles for us. But he says, in this place, it is an opportunity to stop what you're doing, but also to stop who you're becoming. And I always find that really interesting because it is the invitation to really reflect on who you're becoming and to really reflect on what you need to stop. What are you doing right now that's not serving you? And what would stopping that mean? And who would you become if you did stop? And I think it speaks, of course, to that point of rediscovery and just constantly meeting yourself anew and getting to an increasingly intimate understanding of who you are and why you are with your imperfections. Because I don't think that a deeper awareness necessarily makes us better people. It just means we know the fullness of who we are, right? We know the kind, we know better the pretty and the ugly, and what triggers them and why they come to the surface.
No, I think you've touched on a lot, but let's just to wrap up.
Sure.
What are you hoping that readers will take from your book?
I really hope that the book is a personal provocation more than anything else. For me, I really wrote the book for myself. People always ask me, who did you write? Who's the audience? I'm like, I wrote it for myself. I needed to get stuff out. And that's what I did. And I needed to confront myself, to meet myself anew in a lot of ways. And the thing that the beast I needed to look in the eye was the beast of control. I am hoping that the book becomes a personal provocation to everybody reading it, for them to find their beast. What is the thing that perhaps has served you all your life, but is also the very same thing that stands in your way? And are you going to be courageous and brave enough to make a distinction between the two? When do I need this and when do I don't? And do I know how to put it down when it stops serving me? That's what I hope the book does. It might be control for me. It could be perfection for somebody else. It could be, a range of other things for other people. But what is the thing that you've got to really engage with and put down, so that when you pick it up, you're picking it up with intentionality, and you know what the purpose is going to serve in that moment, and you know how to put it down when you're done.
No, I think the key takeaway is it serves you, but it also stands in your way.
Exactly.
And we can't just say, oh, this thing is, I want to just get rid of it, because it can be what's also your strength.
Exactly.
And I think, this conversation with you and speaking about, all these identities that we carry and the past and how it weighs on us, it's important to reflect on how we reflect and how we take it. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and with that honesty. I think that's the most powerful thing. It takes a lot of bravery to open up to people you don't know, to just this unknown audience of the world, and to share such intimate details. But I think it's also it's to your strength as well, and I'm sure it's a lifeline to someone that you're throwing out there who says, I need that, I needed to hear that. So
I hope so.
That's the power of sharing our stories. So thank you.
I 100% hope so. And thank you so much for having me. It's such a gift to be at the Witness, having grown up in Pietermaritzburg. It feels like it's coming full circle. I grew up reading the Witness. It was an everyday experience in my life, whether I was seeing a copy of the paper at home or people reading it in the taxi. To be here and to be able to share my story is something that I'm not going to forget for a very long time.
Well, I'm so glad that we're still here when you come back, and you must take a copy and read it again. And also, just before we go, for our readers who, like me, are desperately, after listening to you, we want to get a copy of your book. Where is it available?
So we're all over the country. We're at every exclusive books and any big sort of bookstore. We're also online, so you can also order on Take-A-Lot. You can order on Amazon, and that means you can also get your families who are overseas to order a copy anywhere in the world. You can get a copy of After the Fires. But if you're in Maritzburg, head over to Liberty Mall or any of the malls and go to exclusive books and get a copy.
Heard it. It's everywhere. It's available. No excuse. Thank you so much, Nozi, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.